Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. A big change for Boeing.
CEO Dave Calhoun will be resigning from the position of CEO.
CNBC's Phil LeBeau sat down with Dave Calhoun in his first interview after the announcement. Some things have to change in the company's culture of safety versus speed.
Everybody has to be able and capable of raising their hand and stopping a line if they have to. That is the premise for going forward.
And the EU taking aim at Apple, Alphabet, and Meta. A headache for big tech, but that might be the point. The pros and cons of regulation with author Walter Isaacson.
And let's remember that if they hadn't done that to Microsoft when it tried to bundle search and browsing and everything into its operating system, you would not have Google now.
Plus, government shutdown averted, for now. And the FAA is boosting its oversight of United. What's driving all these airline issues?
It's still the safest way to travel. The stuff comes up in headlines, and this is how we react to it.
It's Monday, March 25th. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick. He's Joe Kernan.
Yep. Still.
Andrew is off today.
Still Joe Kernan.
Yeah. It's Monday morning, and the Dow and the S&P are coming off their best weeks of 2024. NASDAQ was at another new high on Friday. And Goldman Sachs has actually reiterated its year-end target for the S&P 500 of 5,200. But the firm's analysts, led by Chief U.S. strategist David Kostin, also see a possibility for mega-cap tech leading the index up another 15% to 6,000 by the end of the year. So these are some interesting calls, some things to pay pretty close attention to. Kind of splitting it, seeing things either way, but I guess that's what you get when the markets are doing the things they've been doing recently.
NASDAQ was up, but the Dow was down 300. That's interesting.
But it was the best week that they've seen for the S&P
still,
and the Dow coming off of this. Yeah.
I like this Treasury story and just these incredible numbers again about, you know, when we talk about debt to GDP, unheard of and not getting any better, and now you see what. When you don't take in enough money through taxes for whatever reason,
you can't cover costs.
The Fed covers it, or the Treasury covers it, not the Fed, whomever you want to call it, whatever name you want to use. But you issue more, and the numbers are staggering: 60% more issuance than just from a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. So who's going to?
It's much bigger numbers. And
much
you have
bigger
to hope
numbers.
That the markets are going to pick this up.
Isn't that how things unravel, though, eventually?
The markets don't care until they do, is the problem you run into with some of these things.
Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic is projecting just one interest rate cut this year, adding it will happen later than previously expected. This is probably the most hawkish or the least dovish comments that we've heard as things have the tide has turned a little. Bostic is a voting member on the FOMC, and he had been guiding towards 2 cuts, only 2, so it's not that different for him in 2024. And he didn't think the first would occur until the summer. Bostic telling reporters it'll be a close call, and he's going to have to see how the data comes in over the next several weeks.
The government will remain open at least through the summer. President Biden signed that $1.2 trillion spending package, finalizing the remaining batch of bills and a long-awaited budget to keep the government funded through October 1st. The Senate passed the budget in a 74-24 vote at roughly 2 a.m. Saturday morning time. Technically, that was 2 hours after the deadline due to last-minute disagreements. However, the White House said that it would not begin official shutdown operations since a deal had been secured.
Regulators stepping up scrutiny of United Airlines following several safety issues in recent weeks. FAA officials will increase oversight of the airline to ensure the carrier's compliance with safety regulations. The company says that the agency will be reviewing some of its processes, manuals, and facilities in coming weeks. The FAA warning that future projects may be delayed based on its findings. The airline could also face restrictions on new routes and the use of new planes. Chief Executive Scott Kirby reached out to customers last week to reassure them that the mishaps, while unrelated, are receiving a high level of attention and the FAA has tightened oversight of Boeing and its manufacturing processes after that door plug blew out from a brand new 737 MAX plane mid-flight in January. Watching, it was weird. You've seen all the articles about people checking to see what kind. They've never checked ever.
I check
kind
to see
of
what plane when I'm booking them.
People are doing that now, and we haven't done that, but I did have a family member that they had a connecting flight. And I saw on the first one, oh, she's on an Airbus. Good. Yeah. Then when she had landed, everything was fine. The second flight was a 737 MAX 9. Is that the one?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I haven't taken myself off.
But I mean, I can't believe I'm thinking that there's something wrong with the 737. That's bad. That's bad that Boeing is in this position. Because the 737 MAX 9 should be, wow, Boeing's state of the art. This must be a great plane.
Yeah, and by the way, we're saying all of this in the same breath, the Boeing and the United issues. Some of the United issues have been with older planes and not the MAX 9s. And these are raising questions about maintenance issues too, which I think is why it's not surprising to see the FAA saying that they are going to put heightened focus on what's happening there. We spoke with Oscar Munoz last week. He's the former CEO at United Airlines. And the question I asked him was, are we just hearing about these accidents or issues more frequently because of social media?
I think things do happen. Are they happening more often than not? I don't think that's the case. But nevertheless, I think the company's taken the right measures to reassure folks.
I'm not sure I buy it if the FAA is actually stepping in and making these moves. I guess the FAA has to do it because it's been so public and they don't want to look like they're asleep at the wheel.
No.
So to speak.
Right. They want to make it look like it's overblown, probably.
Probably. I would say that's probably the case.
But we're only human, and
right.
when we have loved ones that are traveling, we want to make sure everything.
It's still the safest way to travel.
Think about the last. I don't want to.
It's better than.
I don't want to jinx it.
Had your loved one been on a bus heading down there or driving
Anything.
yourself or the rest of these things, it's still the safest way to travel. And the stuff comes up in headlines, and this is how we react to it. In the meantime, Boeing's largest union is reportedly seeking a board seat at the plane maker. According to the Financial Times, the International Association of Machinists District 751, which represents 32,000 workers at Boeing plants across Washington state, is looking to have a bigger voice at the company. The union just began contract talks with Boeing earlier this month. It's its first in 16 years. In a statement to Reuters, Boeing says that it is reviewing the union's proposals and plans to discuss them at the bargaining table. How is this their first negotiation in 16 years?
Yeah, good question.
Next on Squawk Pod, another inquiry into the bigness of big tech. The European Union launching a probe into Alphabet, Apple, and Meta. Tech titan biographer Walter Isaacson explains why it's such a big deal and why it might be a good thing for consumers.
We want the creative destruction of competition in this market, and that's what's going to happen with these cases.
You're listening to Squawk Pod.
Stand by, Joe. Here's Mike. Q.
Good morning and welcome back to Squawk Box here on CNBC, live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Joe Kernan along with Becky Quick. Andrew is off.
The European Union is launching an investigation into Apple, Alphabet, and Meta. This is the first probe under the sweeping new Digital Markets Act tech legislation. The Commission says that it is concerned about constraints the tech companies place on developers' ability to freely communicate with users and promote their offers. I want to bring in Walter Isaacson. He is Perella Weinberg Advisory Partner, a Tulane professor, and a CNBC contributor. He's also the author of biographies on Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, many, many other luminaries. And Walter, this is really a big deal, especially after what we saw last week with the DOJ taking on Apple.
It's totally huge. And in some ways, it's both sides of the political spectrum, especially in the United States, are taking on this notion of the bigness of the tech companies, for better or worse. And it goes all the way back to U.S. v. Standard Oil, where Standard Oil was tying its products to other fields so that you had to use their gas stations, their distribution lines. And this was ruled illegal. And you're seeing it with U.S. v. Microsoft about 20 or 30 years ago. And now Apple, Google, Facebook are all in the line of fire.
Are what these big tech companies doing similar to what Standard was doing? I mean,
absolutely. It's tying and bundling. Now, what Standard Oil said, what John D. Rockefeller said, is it's good for consumers. It makes it cheaper. It's much more efficient. And what they came up with back then is a standard that says there's two prongs: what harms consumers and what harms competition. And you shouldn't do either. And it's very similar, because if I search Google, instead of necessarily sending me to websites now, it gives me its own products where I can make a reservation. I can go to, likewise, Apple ties in its payment system to other things. This is good for consumers sometimes. Steve Jobs was great at wanting to have sort of one big ecosystem that was seamless, but it does mean competitors can't come along. And let's remember that if they hadn't done that to Microsoft when it tried to bundle search and browsing and everything into its operating system, you would not have Google now.
Okay, that's a very interesting perspective, and one that makes me think this is going to have a lot more teeth than maybe some of the guests we have spoken to about this.
Well, it's got a lot of teeth because you got the FTC.
Well, Apple has said that they're doing it because of concerns about privacy for their customers and concerns about cyber attacks potentially coming in. Can you do it for those reasons if they can't prove that you're doing it for anti-competitive reasons?
Well, it's true. Apple is doing it for privacy reasons, and it's pretty good. I like buying things through Apple because of that. Right. But it also means if you're CNBC, if you're Time Magazine or something, you do not get direct contact to your consumers, because they're the ones that control payments. In other parts of the world, we have these mega payment apps. We're talking about Elon Musk a moment ago. He's trying to make X into a super payment app where you can transfer money and do things on that. These things could not work right now in the Apple ecosystem, except for if there's pressure from the antitrust folks.
And your point was, we're glad we have Google?
I am.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, no, but my point was...
Well, how do you know that the Microsoft product wouldn't have ended up being... Google's got its own issues, obviously.
But the point is,
kidding. I'm glad we have it. But you're sure that this is the same with Apple? I'm not sure that it's directly comparable, what we're talking about.
Well, what's happening is it's comparable to me because it's actually good for consumers, the way Becky said, which is your privacy is protected. It's one nice ecosystem. But it's bad for competition, meaning these other payment systems, other apps won't develop.
Right.
And we want in America, where my students at Tulane, and they come up with a great idea of how to do something, they don't want to have to then go to a venture capitalist. I think most of the time,
yeah, I know, but most of the time the competition in this country is from innovation and entrepreneurs, and it's not, I don't immediately think, wow, innovation is being stifled by these big companies. I don't immediately think, I look at the guests we have on. I look at the 50 disruptors that we always talk about at CNBC. I don't think the government needs to come in and decide that Apple is too good at what it does. And companies, by definition, try to do better than their competitors. Correct. And it becomes almost a subjective viewpoint about whether kicking your competitors' butts because you're good is different than using antitrust, something that's outlawed.
That is such a key point, which is in America, if you get really, really good and do things, you can get dominance in your field, and the law shouldn't do anything about it. But what the law says, ever since US v. Microsoft, is you can't use that dominance, say in the smartphone business, to then get dominance in an adjacent or other field where you're crushing competitors.
You don't think that the current antitrust sentiment from Lena Khan and from Cantor, you don't think it's the pendulum? I think they're out of their minds, how far they've gone. I think
the pendulum, of course, has swung, and it's swung in a historic way, which is it used to be this two-pronged approach. Hurt consumers, hurt competition. Both were bad. Then for the past 50 years, you had the Chicago school that said, let's just focus on consumers. It doesn't hurt the consumers, no harm, no foul. That's sort of the position you argued a moment ago.
Right.
I think they're going back to saying there are two prongs. We want to protect competition as well as consumers.
It's like the Fed having a dual mandate, but they decide which one they're going to focus on anyway.
We've seen the European model of protecting competitors. How's that work for innovation?
Very well, and Europe has not been great in innovation, if you want to say what's going too far. the Digital Marketing Act, which is what's being used this morning to go after the big companies such as Google, I'm a little bit more skeptical. So
I'm trying to play this out from the market's perspective, because it's been these big tech companies that have really been driving things. Even this morning, Goldman Sachs is saying they're looking at a base case still of the S&P ending the year at 5,200, but a team of their analysts is saying, look, we could see big tech driving it up another 15% to 6,000. If these cases are successful, even if they're not, if they drag out over a period of years, what does that do for the potential of these companies to flourish?
I think your question of dragging it out over years is actually the relevant one. That's what happened with Microsoft. There are very few people who can actually remember who won in the end on the US v. Microsoft, where they were trying to bundle the browser and many other things into the operating system. You know, Apple lost the original case, and they didn't do, Microsoft lost the original case, but then there wasn't a remedy of breaking up.
But Bill Gates said it was like why they missed out on the phone.
And what it did was it constrained Bill Gates from doing a mobile operating system, from doing social media. Well, that's good and bad. It means that Apple gets to rise. It means that social medias like Facebook get to rise. We want the creative destruction of competition in this market, and that's what's going to happen with these cases. They won't get solved.
We want creative destruction, but we don't want regulators to hamper companies for years, then lose the case. And oh, by the way, we got what we wanted anyway because we tied them up.
Or kill the goose. We're constantly trying to kill the goose that laid the golden egg.
If you can't win the case, if you can't make the case, then you shouldn't have been tying them up for years.
They throw it up against the wall and nothing is stuck so far.
Well, you can go back in history from Standard Oil to IBM to Microsoft.
AT&T.
AT&T.
Too late for IBM. Well, wait a minute, they broke AT&T out?
Yes.
It's back together.
It's back together.
That's right.
Yeah.
That to me is the biggest issue. If you are doing this and you don't really have the law on your side, you just have the might because you're the government and you're big.
But they do have the law on their side.
If they lose at the end of it, they're still effective. They still get their way.
They won most of the US v. Microsoft. And I think on these cases, where I do a search, where I do things where I want to pay for something, I want to have choice. If they force it to allow more choice, you're going to see things like digital payment systems, which are very clunky and bad these days, if competition is opened up and people get to find different ways to do payments, for example.
We had Tim Wu here, and he basically said last week, he was one of the architects in the Obama administration and even up through the Biden administration, and what to do with all of this stuff. He said they're not going to settle because what they want is far more than any company would be willing to give.
This Justice Department is not into easy settlements. So they can't wave a magic wand and say they want to understand that blocking competition illegally won't be tolerated anymore.
Apple is doing this not just to harm competition. It's doing it because it doesn't want payment systems where people's privacy gets violated. So it is complex. Apple has its own good motives as well as trying to protect its ecosystem. I mean, you know the Apple ecosystem. And once you get in it, you feel very comfortable, but you ain't going to go out of it.
That's true.
That's good. That's bad.
Yeah. Walter, thank you.
I'll come back.
The 23-year-olds in Silicon, they already run the world. They don't need any help. They're so much smarter and thinking more about these things, aren't they?
I'll tell them you said so.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, you don't want to miss this. Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun stepping down after a turbulent time for his aircrafts. His first interview after the news broke was with our Phil LeBeau.
This has been out there for years, that you guys are about pump the product, pump the product, pump the product, and not enough about quality control.
Yeah,
how do you change that?
Oh, you slow things down.
Welcome back to Squawk Pod. I'm producer Katie Kramer. Boeing, the storied American manufacturer of airplanes, has had a bad run. 2 deadly crashes in 2018 and 2019 of the 737 MAX 8 jet due to issues with the MCAS software system used in the cockpits. A piece of a MAX 9 blowing out in the middle of an Alaska Airlines flight earlier this year. This has meant full-time crisis for the company and its leader, CEO Dave Calhoun. He was the former Boeing board chairman who took the CEO job in 2019 after the MAX 8 crashes. Late last week, it was reported that the company's board of directors would be meeting with the heads of the major airlines to talk about Boeing without its CEO present. Was the writing on the wall? Well, we had breaking news this morning on the Squawk Box TV broadcast, and here's what that sounded like.
We've got breaking news on Boeing. Let's get to Phil LeBeau joins us now with more. Hey, Phil.
Hi, Joe. We've got a major management shakeup at Boeing, the company announcing 3 significant changes. Let's start first with the CEO position. CEO Dave Calhoun, as you take a look at shares of Boeing, Dave Calhoun will be resigning from the position of CEO at the end of the year. He's got a lot on his plate between now and then. In an employee newsletter that was just sent out, he says, we are going to fix what isn't working at Boeing. And there's a lot that's not working right now. So the company will begin a CEO search, but it will not be led by Board of Director Chairman Larry Kellner. He is resigning as chairman of the board, stays on the board through the annual meeting in May, but he resigns as chairman. The new chairman, Steve Mollenkopf, who has been on the Boeing board since 2020. He will lead the CEO search. Stephanie Pope is moving into the position of CEO of Boeing Commercial Airplanes. Stan Deal, who had been in charge of Boeing Commercial Airplanes since 2019, has resigned. Stephanie Pope, the COO, now moves up into that position as president of Boeing Commercial Airplanes. And so that's the big position in terms of correcting the manufacturing problems that have been exposed over the last several months. But again, the big headline here, you've got 3 changes in the management at Boeing. You've got Stephanie Pope moving into the position of head of Boeing Commercial Airplanes. You've got Larry Kellner out as chairman, replaced by Steve Mollenkopf on the board of directors. Steve Mollenkopf will lead the CEO search, which is the 3rd position. Significant news. Dave Calhoun, he is resigning at the end of this year. We will talk to him about these changes, as well as his view about where things are at Boeing as it wrestles with a lot of problems within its manufacturing facility here in Renton, Washington, as well as the outlook for Boeing and the management in the future, where it will not include Dave Calhoun after the end of this year. Guys, back to you.
5 points up so far on, we'll see how that works. The initial knee-jerk reaction on all this is positive for the shares, I guess, Phil. I'm trying to...
Not surprised, Joe. Not surprised. Not surprised. Look, the pressure has been building for them to make some significant concrete significant concrete action. And this is it. You have Boeing's board saying, look, we're putting new management in place. We don't know who the CEO is going to be. That will be determined over the next several months as Steve Mollenkopf begins the CEO search. No doubt they'll probably involve an outside recruiting firm. But there's a unique skill set that is required to become CEO of this company. And the question becomes now, what are Steve Mollenkopf and the Boeing directors looking for? They'll decide that over the next several months. But this is the beginning of Boeing saying, we're moving forward. This is what we're going to be doing in terms of our management. At least 2/3 of the management. We'll find out about the CEO later this year.
In the past, we've sort of watched it. It's hard to figure out who would make a good CEO of a company like Boeing. Now, Mollenkopf is an impressive guy. He's not very old. This isn't going to be a Dick Cheney, I'm looking for a vice president, maybe it should be me, or it wouldn't happen.
I don't think so. I don't think so. But the last time that Boeing went outside, the last time, Joe, that Boeing went outside to bring in a CEO, you've got to go back to what, 2004, 2005? That's when they brought, no, not Mullally, when they brought in Jim McNerney. From 3M. Right. They brought him in here. Yeah. But keep in mind, he previously had run GE Aerospace, GE Aviation, so it's not like he was foreign to what was happening in the world of aviation.
And their assembly lines, too. I think that's why in the past, we've explained it that way. But we have talked quite a bit about changing management in the middle of something like what's going on with Boeing. And that's sort of why I think Dave Calhoun was able to make the case that and he's still going to be there, obviously, seeing it, the company through the transition until the end of the year. So, there's stability, but there's also
Joe, that's
change.
One of the questions we're going to have for Dave. That's one of the questions we have for Dave. Why not leave now? Why wait until the end of this year? Now, there's two ways to look at this. You can look at it full sweep, let's clean it out. But let me tell you, if you were to replace Dave Calhoun right now, who would you put into that CEO position? Would you put Stephanie Pope in that position? You could, but you also have the question of, is that who you want to run the company long term? Or do you take the other approach, which is, we need to have a CEO in here who understands everything that's going on. Let's take our time. Let's do an outside search. And they'll also look internally as well. Let's do that search and make sure we get the right person, as opposed to saying, boom, here's the changes across the board, and putting yourself in really a difficult situation with a new head of Boeing Commercial Airplanes and a new CEO at the same time. Right,
and I can channel the stock. It's like, oh, good, it's happening. I'm up 5 points. It's, well, wait a second, who are we going to get? Wow, we still got a lot of problems. We still got a lot we have to do. I'm up 2 points. So you can see the almost investors trying to decide and then coming to grips with this isn't going to be solved immediately just because you're changing management eventually now. So it's going to be interesting to watch. Look forward to that interview. Thanks for bringing it on the flagship morning show, Phil.
Dave, thanks for joining us here. You heard what Joe said, stepping down at the end of this year. Why now? And was this completely your decision?
Yeah, first of all, 100%. Why now? I've entered my 5th year. At the end of this year, I'll be close to 68 years old. I've always said to the board, and the board has been very prepared, I would give them plenty of notice so that they could understand and plan succession in regular order. And that's what this is about. It's me giving them notice that at the end of this year, I plan to retire. And then them taking the actions that they've taken. I'm actually very proud of the way the board has handled everything. Very deliberate. The move with Larry, in my view, very deliberate. The entry of Steve as our new chairman, very deliberate, all very qualified and great decisions.
If you're going to be leaving, some will say, why not just leave now? Why wait until the end of the year?
We have another mountain to climb. Let's not avoid what happened with Alaska Air. Let's not avoid the call for action. Let's not avoid the changes that we have to make in our factory. Let's not avoid the need to slow down a bit and let the supply chain catch up. We got to get at that, just like we got at the rest. And we will get through that. We will get through that. And I've committed myself to the board to do exactly that.
You've got 2 other big management changes. We'll talk about the board changes in a bit. But you've got Stan Deal stepping down, resigning as head of Boeing Commercial Airplanes. Stephanie Pope, the COO, moves into that position. What does she bring to the table that is different from Stan?
Well, the big thing here is, first of all, Stan is retiring. This is all about a clear path to give our best people internally an opportunity to shine in front of the board, demonstrate everything that they can do. Stephanie's track record speaks for itself. She has been a leader in every position she's had. She has seen every part of the company. She has most recently led our global services business. It services both our military customers and our commercial customers every day, all day, taking calls, responding, doing the work. She has really differentiated herself. So the move we made at the end of the year to put her into a chief operating officer position was a very deliberate move.
As you know, just last week, airline CEOs went to your board, went to Larry Kellner, and they said, we want to meet, we want to talk with the directors directly, but we don't want to hear from Dave Calhoun in this meeting. We don't want Stan Deal in this meeting. When you first heard about that, what was your reaction?
Well, first of all, I would just take issue. I know all the people they call, and I know all of that, and I talk to them every day, all day. I don't think it was anywhere near that kind of messaging. Our board and I talk to our customers every day, all day. We've had a CEO come in and talk about the accident, talk directly with the board, and I volunteered to leave that meeting because I want clarity. I want transparency. That's what we all want. So, yeah, I understand. You know, if you put this in context, they run an everyday, all-day business. I run a long cycle development business, and a long cycle production business has to deliver them a perfect airplane. And so those 2 things, when they meet and they collide, it creates this kind of environment. And that's the environment we're in. But I listen to our customers all day.
Do you understand their frustration? Because I heard from airlines last week, they said, we want concrete action. We want concrete steps to make changes.
I think the news that Brian West had to deliver just earlier this week to the financial community about the slowdown in our factory, our determination to get ahead of that, I think that will demonstrate and be a proof point on just our intent to get ahead of it. We will get ahead of it.
Have you told FAA Administrator Mike Whitaker that you're resigning or retiring at the end of the year?
No, I would never preempt the board in communicating to anybody, but the FAA is with us all week this week. We will go through a 30-day plan with them. Then 30 days later, we'll go through 60, and 30 days later, we'll go through a 90, and we're going to have to demonstrate progress in each one of those moments. And it's a pretty constructive approach, both from the FAA and from our team.
Last week, Mike Whitaker was interviewed by NBC, and he said that when he was out here, what he saw was a culture of move the product, move the plane. It was not a focus on quality control and safety management.
Yeah.
There are issues around the safety culture in Boeing, that their priorities have been on production and not on safety and quality. And so what we really are focused on now is shifting that focus from production to safety and quality.
What was your reaction when you heard those comments?
Well, I recognized exactly what he was talking about because I heard it from all of our own people. Remember, we did a stand down immediately after the accident, and we listened to all our own folks. And we have this bad habit in our company, and actually in many large companies that have to assemble big products. When you do work out of a position, the message you send to your people is, and maybe that work was moved because of a shortage, maybe it was because you're trying to fix something that was non-conforming, but when you move it down the line, it sends a message to your own people that, wow, I guess the movement of the airplane is more important than the first-time quality of the product. And we have got to get that in way more balance, without a doubt.
You've been on the board since 2010, 2011. This is not a new criticism of Boeing. Yeah. This has been out there for years, that you guys are about pump the product, pump the product, pump the product, and not enough about quality control.
Yeah,
how do you change that?
Oh, you slow things down. You catch up. And just a reminder, in 2020, we didn't produce any airplanes in the MAX line, 0. 21, we started the line back up. So we were going from 0 and slowly, steadily increasing our rates. At that very same time, with insatiable demand on the customer side, we had a very sporadic supply side. And so these forces that have been with our industry for a long time probably got even more pronounced, without a doubt. And so our job has to be to sort of say, nope, raise our hand. Everybody has to be able and capable of raising their hand and stopping a line if they have to. And that is the premise for going forward.
Larry Kellner, stepping down as chairman of the board. He'll stay on the board until the annual meeting in May. Steve Mollenkopf steps in. He'll lead the CEO search. There is a narrative that is out there in the investment community that the board of directors have not moved quick enough. Should they have moved faster with these changes?
Yeah, no, not in my opinion. This is a long, very long cycle business. Nobody is more aware of the mountains that have been climbed and the remedies that have been put in place than the board. They want to go at the right pace, and they want to do it the right way, and they want to do it with real foresight, and they want to see people demonstrate their capabilities in position. So that set of moves that we've just talked about, in my view, puts them in the very best position to make those decisions over the remainder of this year and be ready to go in the beginning of next year.
Will you weigh in and share your thoughts on who might be the next CEO?
Yeah, of course. Of course.
And what would you look for?
And I will be nothing more than a board voice, and I will always, always defer to the chair and the governance committee to make those decisions.
What would you look for?
Well, I want somebody who knows how to handle a big, long cycle business like ours. It's not just the production of the airplane. It's the development of the next airplane. Our next leader is going to develop and call out the next airplane for the Boeing company. It'll be a $50 billion investment. That will all happen on that next leader's watch. So I would like somebody who clearly has the experience inside our industry.
A couple of weeks ago, NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy was asked about the investigation into the Alaska Airlines incident and what's been happening here at Boeing. And she basically said, you're not being forthcoming.
We have been informed that they have a procedure to maintain documents on when work is performed, and including when door plugs are open, closed, or removed. We have not been able to verify that. And without that information, that raises concerns about quality assurance, quality management, safety management systems within Boeing.
She didn't use the word stonewalling, but the implication was there. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think it was a reasonably harsh statement and probably not perfectly accurate. On the other hand, Chairperson Hamidi and I have talked several times since that hearing. We have agreed with one another that the minute we thought we were being less than transparent or less than responsive, we would call one another, and I haven't heard from her since. I will say this.
Was she over the top saying that you guys are not forthcoming?
I'm not going to say that. What I am going to say is these professional teams on the ground, the pace with which they solved the issue of what happened, definitively, remarkable. It's, in my view, it's one of the best investigative efforts I've seen in my history in aviation.
Right now, your 737 MAX rate is capped at 38 per month by the FAA. Do you think you're not there right now? You're not producing anywhere close to that rate. Do you get to 38 per month by the end of the year?
Definitely not going to answer that question. What the FAA wants, and way more importantly what I want, is I want a production system that's under control every step of the way. Whether it's 38 or 52 or 16, doesn't matter. It will be under control. We will not travel work to anywhere near the level that it's been traveled, and we will let this supply chain catch up to the demand. And that's the way we have to behave.
Spirit Aerosystems, you guys are in the midst of negotiations. When might we see a deal?
Well, I hope soon. Yeah, I hope soon. We're making progress. The teams have worked closely together. We have to get to real agreements. Yeah, I hope it's soon. And it's very important. And it speaks directly to the subject of traveled work, non-conformance management, all those things. Some pretty dramatic actions have been taken. I think Pat is doing a fantastic job down there in responding to the aftermath of Alaska Air.
You've got your own problems that you're trying to sort out, and now you're going to be potentially acquiring a company that has a whole slew of problems. That's a big enchilada to swallow at a time when you're trying to get your ship in order. Are you worried? That's a lot to take on at one time.
What you just said is why we do it, to get our ship in order. It's a critical supply for us, critical. It's our fuselage. When you go out in the factory, the first thing you're going to see is our fuselage. It's a Boeing fuselage. Our job is to make sure mechanics and engineers freely travel between the shop floor and the design effort, and that they can help one another every step of the way. Vertical integration is the only way to accomplish that.
Final question. You've been around the block a time or two. You've seen companies go through crisis.
Yep.
Where are you in the process of coming out of this latest crisis when it comes to the MAX and quality control?
Well, let me start with companies going through crisis. This company and our people have responded to the crises like no group of employees I've ever seen or been around. They got over MCAS. They certified the airplane. They started up a factory from zero. They created a shadow factory to get airplanes back into the field. They created another shadow factory to basically rebuild all of our 787s, 100 of them. They're up to the challenge. We will get ahead of this one. We are at the early stages of responding to, in my view, an over-exercised supply chain and an over-exercised Boeing factory, and we're going to calm it down. We're going to get ahead of all of the issues that either the FAA and, way more importantly, our own people bring to our attention, and we'll get ahead of it. That will happen.
Dave Calhoun, CEO of Boeing.
All we did was talk about regulation here, or antitrust here, or across the pond.
Surprisingly, though, those big stocks weren't down by much.
No, they will survive, probably. Make sure you join us tomorrow.
Please join us anytime. Squawk Pod is in your feed wherever you're listening now, every day, bringing you the can't-miss interviews and best analysis from our 3-hour morning TV show. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern or stream it live on Peacock. Thank you for listening to Squawk Pod. We'll meet you back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.